And what we've been doing over the last few weeks is really contrasting man's idea of these things versus God's idea of them. Love. According to dictionary.com, and I think every person's general understanding is defined as this: a profoundly tender, passionate affection for another person. I like this one. A warm feeling, personal attachment, or deep affection, as for a parent or a child or a friend. Would you agree that that's generally how we see love? And there, I think, in lies the issue with man in looking at God, right? God's ways are higher than ours. We have difficulty grasping and understanding them because we see things through humanity, right? We see things through our feelings. We see things through our own perception. And so we get confused and we think that love is a feeling, right? We think that when I'm feeling all nice, warm, and cozy, right? Rochelle and I have a saying, and maybe you guys can attest to this. When you just have that moment, we'll refer to it as the warm feeling. You know what I'm talking about? Maybe you're just sitting on the couch, minding your own business, watching a movie, and all of a sudden you get the warm feeling for your kids, right? You're having this nice little, oh, look. When just 24 hours before you were like, you little idiot! Clean your room! You're driving me bonkers! And then you are 24 hours later, I just got the warm feeling. Right? We associate love with a feeling. And from God's perspective, love is not a feeling. And so I don't mean to use the word love, but I really appreciate when I have opportunities when a young couple says, we'd like to get married, we'd like to meet with you, and would you marry us? And so we go through some premarital material, and I love laying out the definition of love for them because they always get the deer in the headlight look. I always ask, I'll sit in the first meeting and I wait. Why do you guys want to get married? And years ago when I was interning, I remember our pastor saying, I will not marry a couple if in our meeting, when I ask them why you want to get married, if the man will not say, because I love her. If he won't say that of his own accord, I won't marry him. At that point, we're done. And that's a really good benchmark. Over all these years of meeting with young couples, I recall one just about 3 years ago. We were sitting in the Village Inn at a Saturday morning talking, and I was baiting the hook as much as I could, giving every opportunity, teeing it up for this guy to say it, and he would not say, because I love her. And I couldn't marry her. I just couldn't do it. And she was even like, oh, well, he loves me. He just has a hard time saying. He's one of those guys that doesn't like, really making all the excuses. And I said, guys, I just can't do it. I'm sorry. They went and got married anyway, and about 90 days later, it didn't work out. And that's not to say that it doesn't have difficulty 9 years down the road too, even when you said, I do love you. But it becomes a reality, because here's the thing. If you've been at this church for some time, you know that one of the things we preach here all the time is that lovers outwork workers 9 to 1. When we love God, we'll serve Him with joy in our heart. When we love God, coming to church is a joy. When we love God, helping the kids is fun. When we love God, volunteering it's a pleasure. But when God is homework to us, man, it's a burden. Everything is burdensome. And when we look at our personal relationships as burdensome, and we see all the difficulty of it, it becomes difficult, right? God's idea of love is not work. It's not hard work. And when we come to grips with what God's idea of love is, then we'll find that loving God becomes a lot easier. Cosmopolitan, the magazine, did a survey recently. They said this. They interviewed a certain amount of women and a certain amount of men. They found this, that nearly 40% of women report that their boyfriends or husbands are not very often or never romantic. 40% of them say he really needs some help. And of the same couples, 75% of the men claim that they are consistently romantic. Right? So that alone gives us a great idea that our perception and reality of love is skewed even on a human level. I want to read a portion of Scripture to you. You could follow along if you're following a YouVersion, or we'll have it up here on the screen. 1 Corinthians chapter 13. This is when I sit down with couples and I begin to talk about love. To the guys, that when I tee it up for them and they hit it all the way down 300, I mean, they just do a good job of saying, I love her, she's amazing, I'm completed with her, she's everything I could ever hope for, dream, even beyond. I can't believe that God would give me such a... they do all that. And then I start telling them these scriptures, they become deer in the headlights. Because up until that point, they thought they loved each other. Then when they discover what God's perspective of love is, they go... 1 Corinthians chapter 13, beginning in verse 4, it says, love suffers long. In other words, it's patient. How many of you wives discover your husbands really wrestle with patience? Or maybe it's the other way around. Guys, how many of you wives really... Don't say it here and now, because you will get punched. Just... Love is patient. It's kind. It does not envy. Love does not parade itself. It's not puffed up. Love does not behave rudely. Hello? I don't care if you've been married for 4 years, 5 years, 18 years, 25 years. This is God's perspective of love. It doesn't behave rudely. It does not seek its own, guys. It is not provoked, thinks no evil, does not rejoice in iniquity, that's sin, but rejoices in the truth. Bears all things, believes all things, hopes all things, endures all things. Love never fails. God's perspective of love, as is given to us to the Apostle Paul, is so much more than a nice little warm feeling. Wouldn't you agree? Yeah? I don't care how powerful your warm feeling is either. Some of you have heard this story, but 16 years ago this season, I was on, you couldn't even call it a date. I was just going to buy a birthday or Christmas present for my nephew Timothy, who was just born in November, and I was going to Cherry Creek Mall. At that time, the only place that I thought had really cool little kid clothes was the Baby Gap at Cherry Creek Mall. And so I took somebody with me, Rochelle. At this point, we didn't like each other like each other. And in fact, I was actually really irritated with her because I'd asked her out like 4 times and she said no all 4 times. And if I was like, you know what, if you don't want to, you can call me, right? Just being an idiot. And I was on my way to the mall and she happened to call, and it was another one of those, all right, let's see. I'm headed to the mall, would you like to come? And I was astounded that she said yes. I was like, sweet. So I pick her up, we go to the mall, and we're walking, and of course it's Christmas time, and it's jam-packed, full, and we had stopped and had a Cinnabon. Thank you, Jesus. Cinnabon. I'm convinced that will be at the marriage supper of the Lamb. I'm just convinced. I mean, those are delicious. I'm pretty sure Jesus invented Cinnabon. That's my own thinking. And so we had a Cinnabon, we're talking and kind of walking around, and it was really just, nothing special. And it was crowded, and we were going to go upstairs to the Baby Gap, and it was, really crowded, and we made our way to the escalator. And, Christmas time is not the season of being polite. Have you noticed that? And I don't care if you're like an 83-year-old woman carrying 19 bags and you have a walker. 13-year-old boys will not wait for you to get on an escalator, right? They just, they're on there. And so I did the gentlemanly thing where you kind of cut into traffic so that Rochelle could get on. When she was passing by, I just barely touched the right there on her back. And when she passed by and did that, I was like, I fell in love! Oh! I'm going to marry this woman. I'm not joking. It really happened that way. I fell in love instantly. Like, if I could give a definition of it, it's like the commercial, I've fallen and I can't get up. I fell and I couldn't get up. I was in love with this woman. Figuratively speaking, I didn't literally fall on the floor, but my heart just was, And it wasn't until we talked several months later to discover that she had the exact same experience. And from that moment on, our eyes were awakened to this, man, I just love you. Right? And for we've been married 15 years, and still to this day, we'll go to dinner and we just look at each other talking about how much we love each other. And even so, and I'm not saying that to get a... I'm not saying it to get any of that. My point in telling you that is even that falls short of what God's idea and intent for love is. I want to give you God's perspective in His idea of love. In John chapter 13, verse 34, He says this, "A new commandment I give you." Now, I want to remind you that Jesus at this point has already had the Sermon on the Mount. And really, what I contend in the Sermon on the Mount is Jesus essentially dismantles the law. And He is making a case for grace, which essentially what He's saying is, I know that you've heard it said, and you follow the law. And that's good, but ultimately what He's saying is that is not going to lead you to heaven anymore. He's giving them the precursor that I'm coming to establish a new covenant. And so if you've heard it said, don't commit adultery, I'm going to tell you that if you've even looked at a woman with lust in your eyes, you've already done it. So He's dismantling the law. He's dismantling our goody two-shoes ideas of how we live and try to follow the law. And He's establishing a case that you need grace. You're going to need the salvation that I will provide. So Jesus is already at this point dismantled the law through the Sermon on the Mount, making a case for grace. But upon all the law that we still are required to follow, right? He didn't come to abolish the law. He didn't come to do away with it. We still pursue Jesus Christ and still have to follow. However, we don't obtain salvation through that, right? And so, Jesus is making a case. On top of everything else that you know you're supposed to do, I've got one more command for you. A new command I give you, that you love one another as I have loved you. That you also love one another. By this, all will know that you are my disciples, if you have love for one another. How many of you guys, well, let me ask you girls. How many of you girls, even though they're about like $900, have a Dolce & Gabbana purse? Or, guys are like, huh? Sorry to go metro on you. Okay, they're $300-400 on the more affordable side, but how many of you girls walk around with a Coach purse? Or want to have a Coach purse? Or I remember in 7th grade, when I was in 7th grade, we begged my mom and dad for Levi's 501. And at that time, they were the 501 shrink to fit. Or, if you went to Montgomery Ward's like my parents shopped, you ended up getting the orange tag Levi's. And you knew that if you showed up at school with the orange tag, you were a nerd. But the cool people had the 501 shrink to fit, and you knew they were because one, they looked like it, and then they had the red tag, right? And so you were sporting the coolness, right? We become obsessed with brands, don't we? Whether it's the purse you carry, whether it's your shoes, whether it's the jeans. You know, one of the brands I love is Adidas. I don't know why. I'm just an Adidas freak. Every type of tennis shoe or sweatpants, it's all Adidas. Some people, it's Nike. Some people, they like Pony. Whatever. Anyway, we're obsessed with the brand. And I want to make the point that Jesus' brand is love. Jesus was known by love. And if we're His disciples, the brand that we walk around with, whether for your own sake of creating a mental picture, the purse or the jeans or the coolness, the brand of Jesus is love. And we're known by the love that we have. We're known in how we treat each other first and foremost. That's why here we teach the tree of life all the time. Because if the church is known for infighting and backbiting and, oh, I'm going to die with the chairs out of line. Lord Jesus, help Rodzo CP right now. Amen. So, what am I going to do? Go back to my notes. 1 Corinthians chapter 16, 14 says this. Let all that you do, how much? All. How much? All. You know what's funny when you do a Greek word study on that word all? You know what it means? All. Absolutely. Let all that you do be done with love. Proverbs 10:12 says this, guys. Hatred stirs up strife. Let me just ask a quick question. How many of us have strife? Don't raise your hand. How many of us have strife going on in our life? How many of us wrestle with perpetual strife? I want to tell you what the Bible says. Hatred stirs up strife. So if there is continual, perpetual strife going on, instead of blaming other people, the first thing we need to do through the filtering ourselves through the Word is, Lord, do we have some hatred going on inside of our hearts? Because hatred stirs up strife. Listen to this. But love covers all sins. Again, that's another one of the things that when I have marital counseling times with couples, it's interesting. It's really interesting when you find that whether it's a guy or a girl and they come in. To me, the first thing, I rarely listen to the circumstances so much as I just want to see the telltale signs. There are times that I've met with men where, from my perspective, man, that chick is bad news. You can see it. And he'll come in and he won't say one bad thing. He will not give one negative detail. He won't say one bad word about her. And to me, I see that that's a man who loves his wife. And then there are other times that I'll meet with a guy, and it looks like his wife has got it together. In fact, that's the kind of wife where everybody's like, can't you be like his wife? And you get alone with those guys, and they start throwing them under the bus and telling you all the stuff they did, and you think she's great, but let me really tell you, and then you discover you don't really love her. Our actions will reveal what's within our heart. The Bible's clear. And so the principle for us to live by, if we love and if we walk in love, is that love covers sin. Love doesn't parade sin around. Love doesn't take somebody's mistakes and put them up and say, look how horrible they are. What a loser you are. Love covers a multitude of sin. Just like Jesus did, it becomes the brand of walking in Jesus. It becomes the earmark of Christians. Peter affirms that in 1 Peter chapter 4, verse 8. He says this, above all things, have fervent love for one another. For love will cover a multitude of sins. Romans 12:9 says this, let love be without hypocrisy. That's a word thrown around the church an awful lot, isn't it? It's one of the number one reasons. There's two top reasons that people will not go to church. You know what they are? The first one is they are convinced that the church wants their money. Right? God doesn't need your money. He really doesn't. The second thing that people won't go to church for is because they say people are hypocrites. Right? So they have two qualms. How do we overcome both of those? By walking in love. Putting the brand of Jesus upon us. Love covers a multitude of sin. Paul says, let love be without hypocrisy. Abhor what is evil and cling to what is good. 1 John 4:8 says this, he who does not love does not know God, for God is love. We're starting to narrow this in now, shooting a little closer to the heart. If you love God, it'll show. And here's the reality check for us. That if we can't love the people around us, not only do you not love God, you don't even know Him. John later goes on to say in 1 John 4:20, if someone says, I love God, how many of you say I love God? Show of hands. You love God. Okay, so we're talking to some people here that this would be applicable to. If someone says, I love God, and hates his brother, how many of us hate our brothers? If someone says, I love God, and hates his brother, he's a liar. For he who does not love his brother whom he has seen, how can he love God whom he has not seen? And this commandment we have from him, that he who loves God must love his brother also. Last scripture. John 15:13, Jesus says this, greater love has no one than this, than to lay down one's life for his friends. How many of you guys have Facebook accounts? I've noticed something on Facebook. I'm just going to go ahead and be blunt and honest. Is that all right with you all? First of all, your food never looks as good when you take a picture and put it on Facebook as it does in reality. I'm just saying. That's all I know. And I've made some good steaks and wanted to take pictures of them, but they just never look as good when you put them on Facebook. That's a freebie, an FYI. Tuck that in your back pocket. Take it home with you. Next time you want to take a picture of your dinner plate, just remember what I said. Secondly, Facebook is not the place to air your laundry. Amen. It's created a venue for people to... Come here real quick, Vince. Vince is my favorite example guy. That's because Vince and I are cool. We're cool with each other, and we're just cool. So if Vince and I have an argument, right? No, what's that? Ah! And we're mad. And now I'm angry at Vince. For me to go and not use his name, but be like, people are stupid. And then post, and there it is. Right? Everybody's looking at your profile thinking, wonder who he's talking about. Vince will look at it and know exactly who I'm talking about. Anyone who is around us when we have that disagreement is going to know who we're talking about. But I want to say something. If you're a Jesus follower, you are discrediting his love. You are discrediting his name. You are discrediting the integrity and honor of Christians when you do that. You're airing your laundry to everybody. Yet, the brand of Christians is that we'll be known by our love. You can have a seat. We'll be known by it. And I want to point something out. That when we do that, you might as well just get on the phone or put in parentheses after those posts. By the way, I don't even know or like God because I don't know how to act like him. I told you I was going to be brutally and blunt. My point is, if we are going to be Christians, disciples, then it has to show. It's got to be more than in word. It has to be in deed. We can have disagreements with people and not have the warm, cozy feeling in our heart for them. Right? In fact, there's times that you might have a repulsion in your heart for somebody. But you don't go put it on Facebook. Because here's the thing. As we teach in the Tree of Life, you can at all costs do whatever you can to be right, and you may look right, but you'll be dead right. Better to be in life. Always. If we're Christians, we'll be known by our love. And in this season, as we're talking about Christmas and Jesus coming, the culmination of this talk and this 4-part series is to point out the love that comes as a result of Jesus coming on earth. And he walked in love like nobody had ever seen before, nor since. And his followers are earmarked. They'll be known by their love. First and foremost, in the way that we love each other. First and foremost. And so I want to encourage us. If we want to come to a place where we experience the love of God in a big way, in a real way, in a deep way, then we need to stop putting blocks in front of our path from experiencing it. I'm not saying that everything everybody does is absolutely perfect. I'm sorry, I've tried for 10 minutes to let it go. I'm not saying that we have to be perfect, and I'm not saying that when somebody wrongs you, you just whatever. But I want to remind you what Jesus said on the Sermon on the Mount. When we have enemies, you know that an enemy wants to destroy you, right? And sometimes enemies come in the fashion or form of someone that we've been close to, right? An enemy is not always going to tell you, oh, hi John, my name's Rod. I'm your enemy, and I'm going to make life hell for you in the next couple of years. A lot of times, they're friends. And you don't realize they're enemies until down the road. And they might be trying to destroy your life, absolutely. Jesus says something in the Sermon on the Mount that absolutely ruins our American theology of Christianity. He tells us not just to pray for them, to love them. And the same word love in there is the same love that we've been talking about in 1 Corinthians 13. It's the same love we've been talking about as Paul defines it in Peter. It's the same love. I want to encourage us, guys. Let's rise up as a church and let's be loving. Let's love each other. Let's love the people around us. Let's stand. Let's bow our heads as we pray and close this morning. Lord, we just want to thank you. We thank you once again.